Welcome to Sea and Free Studio. This is the place where we like to explore what makes us unique, special, and different. And sometimes to see and free, and I'm going to emphasize the free of our USD, it requires us to change and challenge the way we're doing things. And our next guest knows a lot about change. I'm going to introduce you to Libby Pollock. After many years helping transform massive corporations like Delta Airlines, Marriott, and UPS, Libby decided to make a pivot in her career and focus more on nonprofit and community efforts. She is now the global change and strategy leader for Habitat for Humanity International, and she's increasing shelter for those in need worldwide. Also working to support low-income women over 35 through the Jeannette Rankin Foundation. She'll tell us a little bit about that later, as well as her work with the Atlanta Women's Foundation, the Jewish Women's Fund of Atlanta, and as a mentor for the Mary Hall Freedom Village. Please welcome Libby Pollock. Hi,
Thank you for
Libby.
having me, Jen.
Yes, it's so great to have you. We haven't gotten to see each other in a little while, but I would love to know what you're up to these days.
Well, gosh, you just covered it in that extensive intro. But as you said, I have the opportunity now to lead change at Habitat for Humanity International. And a lot of people in the US don't even realize that Habitat is global. But we do a lot of work internationally, and a lot of people also don't realize that in the next couple years, especially exacerbated by COVID, there will be 3 billion people who are in need of decent shelter. So I have my work cut out for me in my role at Habitat.
Yes, you do. And when I talked about your introduction, I talked about your expertise in change because you've had that as kind of a thread throughout your entire career. Any major differences you're seeing from your work in major corporations to the work you're doing today and how you drive change?
Oh, that is such a good question. And I would say the work itself, because I focus on the employees at Habitat and how to support and equip them for the changes that we're going through so that they can support the people in need of shelter, that actually is not that different from changing mindsets and behaviors in corporate America. But that's not to say that I haven't had a lot to learn in leaving a career in corporate America after 20 some years and going to work for a large nonprofit for the first time, because I didn't even realize how much I didn't know about international development and just the world of nonprofits in general. So it's very different in that sense. The organization is very different, but because Habitat is so large, we do operate a lot like a big business. And so a lot of, I've always said about the change management field, I feel like the skills are transferable from one organization to the other. So lucky for me, I would say I've learned that that's still the same because human behavior is the same within Habitat and a lot of the corporate companies that I've worked for.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I was going to ask you about your USD because one of the things we talk about here is how your USD it surpasses your career. It is something that really drives you through all of the different stages of your life. And you're talking about how change can be different in different environments, but at the same time you're able to take what you know and apply it. So tell us, Libby, what do you think is your unique, special, and different? And how have you seen that guide you through not only this transition, but others?
Well, it's interesting that you phrase it just like that. And I love your concept of USD. Um, I have spent my entire career in change management. And for those who don't know what change management is, it's equipping and supporting individuals through transformational change within an organization. And it took me a really long time to realize how that linked to my personal passion, which is empowering women to be the best version of themselves. And really, that all revolves around change, small changes, but big mindset shifts that need to happen. And it took me a long time to realize that all of this work that I've done and research that I've done over the years in change could really apply to my personal passion as well.
What do you can you describe that moment? Do you remember that was there a moment where it became clear to you and you just said, this is it. This is where I want to be focused, and these are how these two things come together for me.
Well, it's funny. I remember very clearly in my late 20s, early 30s, even just trying to define what my passion is. People always say find your passion, and there's so much work out there on that topic. And I could not articulate what I was passionate about. And I really remember thinking, what if I don't have a passion? What if I never find my passion? What if I die and I never discover this? And I had the opportunity actually to start working with the Jeannette Rankin Foundation and empowering women before I had even realized that how passionate about it I was. And someone said to me, I wish I was as passionate about something as you are passionate about empowering women. And this light bulb went off. It's funny because I feel like I would have been able to easily have identified that for someone else, but I couldn't identify it for myself. And I realized, wow, I spend so much of my free time working on empowering women. And that linkage with the change and all the research that I've done on individual change and how the brain works and how we go through transformation as individual humans. That in my work I'm able to apply that work, personal, passions, all of it.
Is there something, Libby, for you about helping women? What is important about that, and for you, and was there a certain time in your life where you realized not just so much why that, obviously you just talked about why it became your passion, but why women and helping women and empowering women is so important to you?
Well, I think that, as a woman, it's easy for me to see why women need more support and empowerment. And lucky for me, I have had so much support from other women lifting me up in my life and in my career. And I have benefited from that. And I see how much women can help each other. I've also seen the flip side of that. Um, but I do think it's really important to support people who are in the margins. So whether it's women, whether it's different races, whether it's lower socioeconomic classes, I think that it's really important that people who don't have the power in a culture to be given a voice. And when I say that I am passionate about empowering women, I don't mean women instead of, in place of, above men. I mean equality. I'm really passionate about equality amongst everyone. But there are so many things in our culture that many of us don't even realize are in place that have kept women behind men in jobs and in perceptions and in some of our biases that we have. So I'd love to see a day where women all over the world are really empowered because in the US, it's still a problem, but not nearly as much as it is a problem in many other countries around the world.
Yes, and I think you get a unique vantage point working with Habitat internationally and seeing that. For you, have there been those moments where you've seen that inequality, or it's negatively impacted you, and you've had to remind yourself of that empowerment, model, and how to take some of that back for yourself, so take some of that power back for yourself? Do you mind sharing an example that maybe you've experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that I realized in the early stages of my career that people were more likely to mentor junior colleagues who looked like them, who reminded themselves of them. And what that did, in at least to me and in my experience, was there were in the consulting firms where I started, there were many men in the highest ranking positions, and they felt more comfortable mentoring the young men who reminded themselves of them. And really, there weren't that many mentors at the highest level that were women. And sadly, the few women that there were really had given up the family side of their lives so that they could pursue the career. And I, even at a young age before I had children, felt pretty strongly that wow, this isn't right. This isn't how it should be. That we should have more females who are mothers who are in these higher roles to, and then they can mentor others. But you could see that men were getting more opportunities than women because it's perpetuated itself, generation after generation. And so now I will say I have been extremely lucky since then to have had some amazing mentors, both men and women, but primarily women who have supported me in my growth and believed in me at times more than I believed in myself. And that has just meant so much to me that I can see, it's very easy for me to put myself in the shoes of others who need the support of others to lift them up.
Yeah, and I think that's wonderful, Libby. And I think there's a moment in time where you become the mentor. It's a kind of this full circle moment. Are you finding it powerful and invigorating to become a mentor for other young women who are now looking for a woman to mentor them? And what advice are you giving them?
I love that question. Well, I do love mentoring anyone who whether they ask for a formal mentor or if they're just asking for advice. I find that's one thing I can't say no to, even when I'm in my crusades of ruthless prioritization and trying to say no to as much as possible, is to is to really help other women the way that I've been mentored. But one other thing I really think is key when we think about the mentor-mentee relationships, I have found once the tables were turned and people were considering me as their mentor, that I still feel like I learn as much from them as they hopefully would be learning from me. So in every relationship like that, I feel like it's not always just the learning is going one way. Um, you know, I am a formal mentor through the Mary Hall Freedom Village, as you mentioned during your intro. And um, my mentee through that program is a woman who has inspired me just as about as much as anyone has. And I'm supposed to be her mentor. But she has overcome so many challenges with her family life growing up, with addiction, and with domestic abuse, and still has this deep spirituality and this strong courage to overcome that I can't imagine that she's possibly learned more from me than I've learned from her.
I love that. We had my mentor was on our second episode, Christine May. We talked a little bit about that, about how much I learned from her, and then she's learned from me, and then this past weekend I called her again and asked for advice. It's a nice exchange. We take it very seriously. How much we can actually help each other, and we've extended that relationship and into a friendship. And I think it's really great to hear you say that, because that is how I think we need to look at mentorship and empowerment is when you treat people as equals, and you treat them as adding value and giving you something as much as you're giving them, it really sets them up for being more confident and going out in the world. So I thank you, Libby, because I think it's a really good lesson for all of us as we think about shepherding, mentoring, having apprentices, and helping others. There's a part of the show where I like to ask what's a random question. And the way I do that is you get to pick a number between 1 and 25. And then whatever that question is what we're going to go into.
Okay, I'll roll the dice. I'm going to say 20.
Woo, okay. 20. Okay. Which of these places would you rather be and why? The Amazon jungle, the Saharan desert, the streets of Tokyo, or the fjords of Norway?
Wow. Okay. I've never been to any of these places. So I think that I would go for the streets of Tokyo,
Mm,
um, purely because it seems like there would be more to do there than the other options that you gave me.
yeah. So what are you saying? You like the comforts of the city life?
I do. I think that certainly versus being, in the desert. Um, I think, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to go with the city life.
I love it. I love it. Yes, I had to postpone a trip to Tokyo with my son recently through COVID, and I cannot wait to go. It's seems like an amazing place to visit, and so maybe you're in for a trip to Tokyo here pretty soon when we're all able to
Well,
travel
I
again.
might be, yeah. Well, I did have to cancel a trip to Asia and
Mm,
many other trips like you
yes.
in 2020. And I cannot wait. There's a lot I would give to be able to travel the world again.
Yes, absolutely. I do want to, before we talk about the nonprofit you're supporting, what is next for you, Libby? Obviously, you get to travel when able to get out of the house finally, but any other big plans in your future?
Well, I'm working on that now. I hesitate to say this, but my role at Habitat is a 3-year funded role, and I know not everyone at Habitat views it like that. Um, but I just am having my 2-year anniversary this week, as a matter of fact. So I feel like I have one more year and one more year at Habitat. So now, if I haven't really made the changes happen yet, I've got one power year to pack in, help make as many changes as I possibly can. Um, and then I think I'll be open to my next adventure. I think, when I made you alluded to my transition at the beginning of this conversation from corporate America to a nonprofit. And I could talk about that for a whole nother hour, and I will spare you. But a big part of that was feeling a lack of alignment of my values with my day job. And it really was getting harder and harder for me to compartmentalize that part of my life. And I felt like going into work every day, that there was a piece of my soul that was just being sucked out of my body. And that was out of alignment for longer than I would like to admit. But all that to say, when I finally got the courage up to make a big change in my life, um, I've realized how incredibly important that is to me. And so, whatever adventure I'm going to go on next, that's going to be the number one thing, is that I feel like it's in alignment with what I find most important. And um, it's really important to me to make an impact. And I can't separate my day job from the rest of my life. So that it's going to have to be somewhere where I feel like that there's a way to be impactful to others.
I thank you. And I think sometimes we don't reveal what it can feel like when my father used to say, leaving half yourself in the parking lot before you walk into work. Um, you're leaving a lot of your authentic self, the things that you care about, and you're trying to be something that you think looks like success, somebody else's definition of success. And we don't always
That,
talk about
yeah,
that. Yeah. And I love that you're talking about
that
it.
that's exactly how I felt. It was someone else's version of success. That's what it was. And it took me a long time to realize that too.
Yeah.
Um, but it was on paper, I had everything that I thought I was supposed to want. You know, the job, the title, the perks, a VP at a big company, blah, blah, blah. And yet I was not fulfilled. And I do think it comes down to getting in touch with your true self. In my gut, I knew that it wasn't right. I wasn't aligned. Um, but it was really hard to make that switch and to get the courage to say, this isn't working for me. And it's funny because when I did leave that big company, at the time I said I finally got rid of these golden handcuffs that I've been wearing. It was interesting to see the response that I got because I would say it was very divided between the people who were like, wow, I wish I could do that. I wish that, this wasn't so important to me and I wish I could let that go and do something that's more meaningful. And the other half of people who were like, you have lost your mind. What all these things that you are giving up to work for a nonprofit, but I haven't looked back for a moment because it's just so much more comfortable being aligned with who I am. And I don't think, I'm only in my mid 40s now. I'm going to say only. But it wasn't until I was about 40 that I started to really lean into being my authentic self, I think, and being able to share that at work as well.
Yes. And I think sometimes it can take us a while. It's one of the reasons I'm so passionate myself about this concept of a USD, because that really is about being your authentic self, at the end of the day. And when you have that and you can hold on to it, you take it everywhere you go. And it fuels you on your toughest days, but it's your version of success, And I think it's one of the reasons I wanted to do this is I was seeing a lot of people tell me like I can't be myself. I have to compartmentalize. I'm adjusting for this person's needs or whatever they expect of me, but it's not me. I'm not communicating the way I like to, or I don't feel good about myself. And I thought that's not okay. I want to change that, and that's why I decided to do this podcast. If it helps just even one person, maybe a dozen people, I'll be super happy. But we want that kind of inspiration, and you're an inspiration, Libby. And I think whatever you do next, you're going to be empowering women as you do it, and you're a powerful woman as well. And so you're going to be leading the pack. Speaking of,
Right back at you, Jen.
thanks, Libby. I appreciate that. One of the things we've talked about a little bit, but I would love for you to tell people more about is the Jeannette Rankin's Women's Scholarship Fund. Would love to be able to raise some awareness for it. And if you could tell us a little bit more about it and how we can support.
Sure. Well, most people sadly aren't familiar with who Jeannette Rankin was. And it's kind of another example of how we don't have women's equality in the US because Jeannette Rankin was the first congresswoman in the US and she was elected in 1916. And so few people have ever even heard of her. And we, of course, know who all of our founding fathers were. And we've heard all of these men's politicians' names over the years, but a lot of people don't know who Jeannette Rankin was or her role in securing the right to vote for women. with the 19th Amendment. I should say for white women because it was only extended to white women then. But she was elected before the 19th Amendment was even passed. And when she passed away, she left a legacy to begin this foundation. And so the Jeannette Rankin Foundation was formed, and that organization raises scholarship money, but also provides support to women who are 35 years and older to get their college degrees. And so, and I love to call out the support piece because it's not just about providing the dollars, which are incredibly important, but it's also providing them that community and that support and lifting them up and helping them realize that they can do that to graduate. And we have a really high persistence rate. In other words, the number of women that graduate is in the 90s or 90 percentile, I should say. And so I feel really strongly that when you empower a woman, you're not just changing her life and the trajectory of her life, but it's her children's life, her family's life, and then the community around her. And so I find it really important to support these women. So yes, I would love. I'm on the board, so that's why I sometimes say we instead of they when I'm referring to the Jeannette Rankin Foundation. Um, but we are certainly wanting to provide more scholarships to women because there are so many deserving women who apply for the scholarships, and we can't give them to every deserving woman. So that's why I'm so passionate about it. Is I want to, when I read the applications, I want to give the scholarship to every single one of those deserving women.
Well, I do too, and I'm with you. And thanks for sharing that history because I think you're right. A lot of us don't know about Jeannette Rankin and the work that she did to pave a path for many other women after her. And so if you want to help Libby lift women up and the families and the communities that they provide for, please, at the end of the show, you'll take your phone, you just snap the QR code, and it'll help you get right to the page that helps you make a donation to the scholarship fund. We would love to be able to fund as many of those scholarships as possible. And Libby, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today. I've really, really appreciated reconnecting with you, hearing what you're up to, hearing how you've reflected on the changes and transitions that you're making, and looking forward to what you're going to do next. I really, really appreciate you being here and sharing your story with all of us.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Jen. It's truly my pleasure.
Good. Well, thank you. I, want everybody to come back. I want you to watch Libby. I want you to watch all of our guests here at See and Free Studio. So please make sure you subscribe. seeandfreestudio.com. You can find us there. You can also find us on YouTube, and you can find us on LinkedIn. And for anyone who emails me through the site right after you see this show, I will give you 1 hour of free career coaching and help you find your USD. So please come visit us.